The lobby of the estate was designed to feel like a verdict. Stone underfoot, pale, seamless, polished until it reflected the ceiling lights with the same obedient clarity as water. Glass rising in clean planes, thick enough to stop bullets and thin enough to pretend it wasn't there. A line of recessed LEDs ran along the edges of the ceiling, neither warm nor harsh, simply correct. The kind of light that refused intimacy. It didn't flatter anyone. It didn't forgive anything. It made faces look like faces in an identification photo. Nothing in the room was accidental. Not the distance between the doors, not the angle of the furniture, not the silence. Silence was part of the architecture here, paid for, maintained, enforced. It lived in the way the air conditioning never hissed too loudly, in the way the elevators glided without a rattle, in the way every surface swallowed fingerprints as if embarrassed by contact. Even the scent was curated, something clean and expensive, a suggestion of cedar and antiseptic, as if wealth itself could be distilled into a sterilizing agent. On the far wall, behind glass that looked like art but was actually armor, a security console sat in a shallow alcove. 3 screens, 4 cameras, a panel of lights that never went dark. The cameras blinked once every few seconds, not because they needed to, but because it reminded anyone watching that they were being watched. The house didn't just protect its owner, it educated everyone else. At precisely 5:58 a.m., the maid entered through a service corridor that didn't appear on the official floor plan. Her access card clicked once against the reader. A green light answered, small and absolute. The door released with the soft sigh of a system that recognized her as part of itself. Her shoes made no sound on the marble. The soles were wrong for noise, rubber that gripped without squeaking, worn in a way that suggested long hours rather than neglect. She moved with the economy of someone who didn't waste motion on proving anything. No swaying, no idle turning of the head, no scanning that would advertise suspicion. Her body did not broadcast, it performed. A lanyard hung from her neck, plain black, no ornament. The badge at the end was crisp, laminated, printed with a staff ID photo that looked like it had been taken under the same cold lights. Name, employee number, a barcode, a small holographic strip that shimmered when she crossed beneath the LEDs. The badge was not a symbol of belonging, it was proof of permission. She crossed the lobby with a cloth folded into quarters in her left hand, spray bottle in her right, and stopped at the edge of a glass table so clear it looked like air. She didn't begin by wiping. She stood still a moment, posture straight but not stiff, gaze lowered, breathing measured. A pause so slight it would disappear to anyone who didn't know how to watch. Then the cloth moved. Slow, clean arcs. No streaks, no circular fussing. Her wrist kept the same angle, her elbow close to her ribs. The cloth folded again, as if she refused to use a dirty edge. When the table was done, she refolded the cloth once more, not because it was necessary, but because a certain kind of discipline becomes a language you speak even when no one is listening. On the security console, the screens showed the outside perimeter, hedge-lined walls, infrared overlays, a driveway that curved like a private road into the trees. The cameras didn't pan randomly. They swept in programmed rhythms, the way a soldier patrols a familiar route, predictable, efficient, bored. Beyond the glass doors, beyond the stone fence topped with discreet wire, the world was still dark. The estate sat apart from the city like a clean refusal. No neighbors close enough to hear, no streetlights near enough to bleed into the grounds. The billionaire's home wasn't just a residence, it was a border, and borders create their own morality. At precisely 6:12 a.m., the billionaire woke, as he did every weekday, to an alarm that sounded like nothing.
The system hummed a vibration through the headboard, gentle enough to feel like a thought. The curtains drew back automatically, revealing a slice of dawn over private acreage. A lake, a decorative one, caught the early light and held it like a coin. His bedroom was the same language as the lobby, expensive restraint, engineered quiet. The mattress adjusted under him, the room temperature corrected itself. A speaker in the ceiling offered a brief summary of global markets in a calm voice that never rose, never stumbled, never acknowledged human panic. He sat up and rubbed his eyes once. Once was enough. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't have to. The cameras looked for him. He lived inside their field of view like a planet lives inside orbit, unquestioned, constant, entitled to the geometry. In the hallway outside his suite, another staff member passed, the house manager perhaps, moving with the same quiet urgency as the maid, but without her exactness. His badge swung slightly when he walked. The maid's badge did not swing. It stayed centered, restrained by something invisible, habit or intent. The house was already awake around him. In the kitchen, steel surfaces reflected fluorescent strips with surgical honesty. The chef portioned fruit without bruising it, coffee brewed at a temperature measured to the degree. The maid moved through the space like a shadow that cleaned light itself, wiping fingerprints from a refrigerator handle no one else would notice, straightening a chair that had moved an inch. No one spoke unless necessary. That wasn't kindness, it was training. The billionaire descended the main staircase at 6:29 a.m., wearing a robe that looked like it had never been wrinkled. He didn't glance at the maid. He didn't need to. The staff were designed to be peripheral, the way houseplants were. Quiet proof of order, a background that made his foreground feel permanent. He reached the lobby and paused at the glass doors, not to admire the morning, but to check the weather with his eyes, as if he trusted vision more than forecast. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, crisp and controlled. Behind him, the security chief, tall, close-cropped hair, posture like a warning sign, entered from a side corridor and stopped at a respectful distance. He held a tablet. The tablet was the modern clipboard, authority rendered sleek. "Perimeter clean," the security chief said. The billionaire nodded without looking at him. The nod was minimal. It granted approval like a stamp, not like gratitude. The maid wiped the base of a pillar nearby, her cloth moving in measured strokes. She was close enough to hear, far enough to be invisible. The security chief continued, voice steady, professional. "No anomalies overnight. Drone sweep at 0400, all clear." A pause. The billionaire's eyes remained on the trees beyond the glass. "Good," he said. It wasn't reassurance. It was confirmation of a belief. Security was not an action in this house. It was a posture, a way of standing in the world that assumed threat could be purchased and neutralized like any other inconvenience. The maid's badge rested flat against her chest, steady as a heartbeat. The cameras blinked again, patient and unblinking in their attention. And somewhere beyond the gate, beyond the perimeter that had been purchased like certainty, something moved with the calm intent of people who had no reason to fear consequences. The house did not feel it yet, but the house was about to learn what it had trained everyone inside it to forget. Silence is not always peace. Sometimes it is merely the absence of witnesses.
The hotel did not have a smell so much as an absence of one. Carpet designed to absorb footsteps, walls painted in colors that refused memory, a lobby arranged to prevent lingering, chairs angled away from each other, a vase of flowers that looked real enough to suggest care, but not real enough to demand it. The air was cooled to the same polite temperature in every corridor, as if discomfort had been outlawed in the building's charter. On the 9th floor, behind a door that could have belonged to any traveling salesman, a man in a gray t-shirt folded a pair of black gloves into a tight square and placed them beside a passport that did not match his face. He checked nothing twice, not because he was careless, but because he was certain. The gloves were new, the kind of new that meant deliberate. No fingerprints, no skin cells, no claim of presence. He lifted them with 2 fingers like evidence, slid them on with slow precision, then flexed his hands once, just once. The gesture wasn't for comfort, it was for confirmation, the body remembering its role. On the bed, laid out like instruments in a clinical tray, were objects that did not belong to the room: metal and polymer, matte finishes, no engraving, no serial numbers visible, equipment that had been made to move through the world without leaving a story behind. He handled each item with a quiet respect that had nothing to do with morality, only function. In another room on the same floor, a different man sat at a desk facing the window. The city outside was still half dark, a grid of streetlights and late taxis moving like insects under glass. He didn't look at it. His attention was fixed on a folder of papers spread across the desk. The pages were thick, clean, no coffee stains, no signatures in ink, only printed text and stamped seals that were meant to look official without being traceable. A contract written in the language of inevitability. Target: male, high net worth, low public exposure, high value assets, political leverage. Security: private, modern, predictable. Time window: narrow. Deliverable: extraction and compliance, or erasure. The words were chosen with care, sterile enough to sound like business, violent enough to mean what they meant. He turned a page, not hurried, not hesitant. A photograph of the estate was clipped into the folder. Aerial shot, clean lines, thick walls, a house built like a thesis. Wealth could become geography. He didn't say the billionaire's name aloud. Names created attachment. Attachment created mistakes. Outside the door, in the hallway, an elevator chimed softly. A cart rolled by. Ice delivered. Towels replaced. The hotel did what it was built to do: allow strangers to pass through without touching each other. In a third room, the team leader stood at the bathroom sink washing his hands as if preparing for surgery. Water ran. Soap foamed. He scrubbed beneath his nails. It was almost ritual. He looked at his reflection, not with vanity, but with assessment. His eyes were steady. His face was ordinary in a way that felt engineered, features that blended into crowds, a mouth that could smile convincingly without revealing anything underneath. On the counter beside him sat a small cloth patch, no flag, no emblem, no unit insignia. A blank square of fabric that would never be stitched to anything, a uniform without name, a role without country. When he finished, he dried his hands carefully and set the towel back on the rack like a guest who respected the property. Not out of courtesy, out of habit. The men were not monsters, not in the way stories like to use the word. Monsters implied appetite, chaos, pleasure. These men had none of that. They were products, manufactured by war zones and broken ceasefires, by governments that needed deniable hands, by economies where conflict was not a tragedy, but a market. They had learned early that ideology was expensive. It required belief. Belief required vulnerability. Vulnerability got you killed. Efficiency was cheaper. And safety for them was not the absence of danger. It was the absence of accountability. A phone buzzed on the desk. The contract man answered without greeting. A voice on the other end spoke in clipped syllables, the kind of accent that floated above nationality. "Confirm readiness." "Ready," the contract man said. "Confirm distance." "Far enough," he replied. There was a pause, a silence shaped like money being counted.
"No witnesses," the voice said. "Witnesses are variables," the man answered. The call ended. No farewell, no blessing. The team leader put on his jacket, plain, dark, functional. He opened the closet and removed a bag, not tactical looking, not military, just the kind of bag anyone might carry to a meeting. The bag's anonymity was the point. He checked the zipper once, then he stopped. Because stopping was a discipline too, refusing to overthink, refusing to invite doubt. In the hallway, one by one, the men emerged. Not together, not as a cluster. Spacing mattered. Patterns were visible. Visibility killed. They passed each other with small nods that were not friendship, not camaraderie, simply confirmation that each piece of the machine was where it was supposed to be. Downstairs, the lobby was beginning to fill with morning movement, business travelers checking out, a woman with a rolling suitcase staring at her phone, a man arguing quietly with a receptionist about a billing error. The mercenaries moved through them like smoke, never touching, never meeting anyone's gaze long enough to be memorable. They left the hotel in different directions. The city did not notice them. It rarely noticed the people who did its violence. Back at the estate, the morning had progressed into its next scheduled stage. Breakfast had been cleared without clatter. The billionaire had moved into a meeting room that looked like a private embassy, table polished to a mirror, chairs arranged with deliberate symmetry, a wall-mounted screen showing charts that turned human suffering into numbers. His advisors arrived in suits that were identical in their quiet authority. Laptops opened, coffee poured. A conversation about leverage began in the muted tones of people who believed consequences happened to other people. In the service corridor outside the room, the maid stood with a tray of water glasses, waiting for her cue. The door was thick, built to keep noise from escaping, but sound still found ways to leak, snatches of phrases, the rhythm of confidence. The committee will fold. We control the narrative. No exposure. She listened without appearing to listen. Her gaze stayed on the tray, on the water that reflected the ceiling lights in long, pale strips, every glass identical, every surface clean, order presented as proof of virtue. A security guard passed, eyes forward, hand brushing his holstered sidearm with a casualness that suggested reassurance. His badge was clipped to his belt, swinging slightly with each step. Swinging. The maid's badge did not swing. She watched his movement not with suspicion, but with measurement, the tempo of his patrol, the length of his stride, the intervals between his turns. Patterns were a language. Systems spoke in patterns. A wall-mounted camera tracked him as he moved. The camera's lens adjusted smoothly, following the guard as if it cared. But the camera's motion was programmed. Care was not part of the code. The maid set the tray down on a side table, not hurried. She reached for a cloth, began to wipe a surface that did not need wiping, positioning herself so the console remained in her peripheral vision. Outside, beyond the glass doors, the driveway was still empty. The trees were motionless. The gate's light stayed green. Inside, the meeting room continued its quiet arithmetic of power. The house believed it was untouchable because every prior threat had been absorbed by money, buffered by distance, handled by someone else. But the maid understood something the billionaire did not, something the security systems could not compute. Danger rarely announces itself. It arrives like paperwork, like a routine discrepancy, like a brief dropout that self-corrects. She wiped the table's edge, cloth folding neatly, her posture unchanged. On the screen, the camera resumed its sweep, smooth, normal, too normal. The wrong kind of quiet settled over the estate, not the purchased silence of insulation and architecture, but a predatory quiet, the quiet of people approaching who had already decided no one inside mattered enough to be remembered. And beyond the gate, beyond the perimeter of wealth and glass and polite lights, violence moved through the world the way commerce did, contracted, delivered, deniable, a service industry, sustained by those who could pay and endured by those who could not.
The first breach did not sound like violence. It sounded like a door opening where no door was supposed to matter. A soft click traveled through the service wing, plastic against metal, authorization granted, hierarchy obeyed. No alarm followed, no raised voices, just the quiet affirmation of a system recognizing itself. The service entrance was narrow by design, concrete walls painted a forgiving gray, fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead. This was where food arrived, where linens moved, where people without names passed through carrying things that belonged to someone else. It was also where the cameras thinned out. The maid was standing near the junction of two corridors when the sound reached her, not loud enough to be called noise, not sharp enough to be danger. A sound most people learned to ignore because it came from places marked staff only. Her body reacted before her mind finished its sentence. Breath in, hold, weight shifted to the balls of her feet, cloth stilled in her hand. Shoes on tile. Not the soft cadence of staff footwear, not the hurried shuffle of deliveries. Measured, even, deliberate. She did not turn her head. Turning too fast advertised awareness. Awareness invited correction. Instead, she reached forward and pushed a utility cart an inch to the left, aligning it with the wall. The movement looked like habit. It was not. It was geometry, creating cover, narrowing angles, shaping space. Down the corridor, a man stepped into view wearing a security uniform that fit too well. The patch on his shoulder was correct. The badge clipped to his chest bore the right colors, the right holographic strip. His rifle was slung low, casual, as if it belonged there. He did not belong. His eyes scanned with interest, not routine. His shoulders carried tension that had nothing to do with morning patrol. He was alert in a way that came from expectation, not duty. Behind him, another followed, then another. Uniforms without names, now dressed in the costume of authority. The maid lowered her gaze and resumed wiping the cart's handle. Submission was a language she spoke fluently. Her posture bent just enough, her shoulders narrowed, her presence shrank. The men passed her without comment. That was their mistake. They moved toward the main interior doors, doors designed to keep out intrusion, not to question it once it wore the right fabric. A badge reader blinked green. The door released. The estate exhaled. Somewhere above them, a silent alarm registered a discrepancy, not large enough to trigger protocol, not violent enough to matter. A note in a log file, a future explanation. Inside the main wing, panic bloomed late and uneven. A security guard near the lobby saw the wrong rifle first. His hand moved toward his sidearm a fraction too slowly. A suppressed shot ended the thought before it became action. He fell without drama, knees buckling, body folding with the grace of someone whose muscles had given up all at once. The sound was small. The silence after it was not. In the meeting room, the billionaire looked up from his screen as the lights flickered. Not off, not on, just enough to interrupt certainty. "What was that?" he asked. No one answered immediately. Silence pooled at the center of the table, thick and accusing. Then a voice crackled through the ceiling speakers, stripped of its usual calm. Security breach, initiating evacuation protocol. The word breach did what the flickering lights had not. It turned men who spoke of control into men who stood up too fast. Chairs scraped, a glass tipped and spilled water across the polished table, the liquid spreading in thin lines like a map of retreat. The billionaire's face tightened, not with fear yet, but with insult, as if reality had violated a contract. In the corridor outside, staff froze. A housekeeper clutched a stack of folded towels to her chest, eyes wide, unable to decide whether to run or wait for permission. A junior aide pressed himself flat against the wall, phone in hand, thumb hovering uselessly over the screen. Hierarchy taught them stillness. The maid did not freeze. She stepped back into the service corridor, moving against the flow of panic. Her shoes made no sound on the tile, breath measured, shoulders loose, every movement trimmed of excess. She reached the junction and paused, listening. Shoes on tile. Closer now, faster. She rolled the utility cart forward, letting it drift into the corridor's center, then stepped behind it. Her hand reached beneath the folded linens and came back empty. No weapon revealed, no drama offered. The first man rounded the corner at speed, rifle up, eyes locked forward. The cart hit his knee hard, not by accident. The impact disrupted his stride just enough. His upper body pitched forward, his rifle dipped. The maid closed the distance in 2 steps. Her left hand caught the barrel and drove it sideways into the wall. Her right elbow rose, not fast, not wild, into the soft hollow beneath his jaw. She felt cartilage give. Air left him in a sound too small to be a scream. She guided his fall, controlling the descent, letting his body block the corridor. The second man saw movement, not meaning. He fired. The shots went wide, tiles shattered, a light burst overhead, plunging the corridor into partial shadow. The maid was already moving, rolling behind the cart, using the fallen body as cover. Silence returned in pieces, broken glass settling, the hum of damaged lighting, breath. She waited. Waiting was not hesitation, it was pressure. The second man advanced cautiously, boots crunching on debris. His rifle searched. She rose behind him and struck the base of his skull with the butt of his own weapon. Clean, final. 2 bodies lay in the service corridor, uniforms impeccable, identities erased before they could be questioned. She dragged them aside, tucking them into an alcove meant for cleaning supplies. Doors closed softly. Locked. Locked mattered. In the lobby, the billionaire was being hustled toward a reinforced elevator by men whose voices had lost their authority. "Sir, this way." "What is happening?" he demanded, louder now. "Sir, please." He resisted, not physically, but with disbelief. His wealth had never required him to move quickly unless it was toward advantage. A burst of gunfire echoed from deeper inside the house. Screams followed, short, cut off. The elevator doors closed on his anger, his confusion, his sudden understanding that money did not make him bulletproof. The maid emerged from the service corridor into the lobby at the same moment the elevator descended. The marble floor was no longer perfect. Chips marked where rounds had struck. Blood streaked beneath a fallen security guard, dark against pale stone. Cameras blinked overhead, still recording, still impartial. She crossed the lobby without running. Shoes on tile. Her reflection moved alongside her in the glass, steady, unremarkable, carrying no sign of the violence already written into the space. She reached the security console and shut it down with 3 precise inputs, not because she wanted blindness, but because she wanted control. The cameras went dark, one by one. Silence deepened. The house, stripped of its eyes, felt suddenly hollow, less a fortress than a shell. Footsteps echoed from multiple corridors now, more of them, coordinated, confident. She positioned herself near a doorway marked staff only and waited, breath controlled, weight balanced. Institutions liked to believe they were breached by force, by explosions, by overwhelming violence, by chaos crashing through walls. But the truth was quieter. They were breached by permission, by doors designed to open for the invisible, by badges that assumed obedience, by systems that trusted hierarchy more than reality. As the first of the next wave approached, weapons ready, expectations fixed, the maid stood in the shadow of the service entrance and let the silence stretch. Then she moved, and the house began to pay for everything it had taken for granted.
The first man reached the doorway, already convinced of victory. His rifle led him, barrel steady, finger disciplined. He had cleared rooms like this before, angles memorized, muscle memory sharp enough to feel like instinct. He expected fear. He expected flight. He did not expect stillness. The maid stepped into him at the threshold, closing the distance so fast the rifle became useless. Her shoulder drove into his chest, not to knock him back, but to take his balance away. Her foot slid behind his heel. Gravity did the rest. They hit the floor together, hard. She did not stay with him. Staying wasted time. As he tried to roll, confused, breath knocked loose, she brought her heel down on his wrist. Bone cracked. The sound was small, decisive. She took the rifle from hands that no longer understood how to close. A second man fired from the corridor. The rounds shattered the doorframe, wood splintering outward like shrapnel. Alarm screamed to life overhead, high, insistent, panicked. Red lights strobed, turning marble into something feverish, unreal. The maid moved through the noise without accelerating. She fired twice, center mass. The man fell back into the wall, red blooming across the uniform meant to project control. His radio chirped once, then dissolved into static. "Contact!" a voice barked through another radio. "Service wing, armed resistance." Resistance. The word was almost flattering. She stepped over the first man, who was trying to scream and failing, and took position behind a column. The column was stone, thick, load-bearing, decorative. Wealth turned structure into armor. She used it. Two more approached from the left, one crouched, one standing, rifles moving in practiced arcs. Their movements were clean, professional, coordinated. They believed they were hunting something cornered. She waited for the standing man to overcommit. He leaned out an inch too far. She fired once. His helmet snapped back, body folding mid-step. The crouched man reacted immediately, firing blind, spraying rounds across the column's edge. Stone chipped, dust filled the air. She rolled right, low, using the smoke of debris as cover. Her shots were measured, no wasted movement. The crouched man went down, clutching his thigh, screaming now, high, involuntary, human. She did not finish him. She moved on, the sprinklers activated with a violent hiss. Water rained down, flattening smoke, turning blood into diluted streaks that ran across the floor like accusations. The alarms layered over each other, an institutional howl that meant too much and nothing at once. Lights strobed faster, red, white, red. The environment fought back, not against the intruders, but against clarity. Noise drowned thought, water slicked surfaces, reflections fractured vision. She adjusted. Shoes found traction, breathing slowed, sight narrowed. Another man came from behind, knife in hand, silent until he wasn't. She heard the shift of air before the blade appeared. She pivoted, letting the knife scrape her sleeve instead of her ribs, and drove her palm up under his chin. He staggered. She followed with a knee to the abdomen, folding him inward, then took his head and drove it into the column. Once. Twice. He slid down the stone and did not get back up. 5. A voice cut through the chaos, sharp, commanding, amplified by proximity. "Clear the lobby, now!" They surged together this time. 4 of them, no hesitation, rifles up, advancing through water and debris, boots splashing, faces set. She retreated, not in panic, but with purpose, drawing them forward, shaping their movement. She backed toward the wide staircase, the marble steps slick with water. The first man reached the bottom step and slipped. She fired. He fell backward, taking another with him. Bodies collided, uniforms tangling, blood staining white stone red. The third man fired wildly, shouting something into his radio, half command, half fear. She dropped to one knee and shot him through the throat. The shout ended in a wet gurgle. The fourth hesitated. That was the mistake. She closed the distance and struck him with the rifle's butt, disarming him, then used the rifle as a lever to break his arm against the railing. He screamed. She ended it with a shot she did not watch land.
9. Silence tried to return, but the alarms would not allow it. She stood in the lobby now, water soaking her clothes, blood on her hands that was not hers. Her chest rose and fell evenly. Her eyes tracked movement, catalogued bodies. 9 uniforms lay broken across the space designed to intimidate. The 10th came slower. He emerged from a side corridor, pistol raised, hands shaking despite training. His uniform was immaculate, untouched by blood or water. He looked young, younger than the others. His eyes darted, not with strategy, but with calculation of escape. He said, "Don't." The word hung there, absurdly fragile amid sirens and gunfire. She did not answer. She stepped toward him. He fired. The shot went wide, cracking glass behind her. She did not flinch. She closed the remaining distance in seconds, knocked the pistol aside, and drove her elbow into her sternum. He collapsed, gasping. She stood over him, rifle steady. "Please," he said, the word tearing itself out of him. She looked at his uniform, clean lines, authoritative cut, the symbol of order now soaked at the edges with water and fear. She thought of badges, of doors that opened, of systems that trusted fabric over truth. She fired once. 10. The lobby fell into a different kind of quiet. Not peace, but aftermath. The alarms continued, but they sounded distant now, like something happening to someone else. Water pooled around bodies, blood spread in thin, branching lines, indistinguishable from one another, staining marble that never expected to absorb consequence. She reloaded without looking. Her hands did not shake. Overhead, cameras blinked uselessly, dark and blind. Somewhere below, the billionaire descended deeper into safety, sealed away by steel and protocol, unaware of the cost being paid above him. The maid stood alone in the center of the space, framed by broken glass and fallen men, her shoes planted firmly on tile, meant to impress. This was not heroism, it was correction. A system had failed because it believed authority was protection, because it mistook access for innocence, because it outsourced its violence and forgot to imagine resistance. And now one woman, armed with discipline and refusal, was balancing the equation with her body. The house believed it was untouchable. It was learning otherwise.
The safe room was smaller than the billionaire expected. Not small in measurement, every dimension had been calculated to accommodate comfort, but small in feeling. The ceiling pressed down with its lack of ornament. The walls were a uniform gray meant to soothe, meant to disappear. There were no windows, no glass, no reflections, only surfaces designed to endure. The elevator had delivered him here in silence, doors opening onto a space that promised survival without dignity. Reinforced steel hid behind tasteful paneling. Air vents whispered. A single chair faced a wall-mounted screen that displayed nothing but a pulsing blue line. System active. The door sealed behind him with a sound that was final in a way money rarely allowed. He stood there for a moment, robe belt clenched in his fist, breath shallow. The people who had rushed him inside, the security chief, 2 guards whose names he had never learned, were gone now. Procedures had peeled them away, assigned them elsewhere, leaving him alone with the architecture of fear. He did not sit. Sitting felt like waiting. Waiting felt like submission. He paced instead, 3 steps one way, 3 steps back, the soles of his expensive slippers whispering against the floor. His hand brushed the panic panel mounted beside the chair, a sleek slab of glass with icons etched faintly beneath the surface. Call, lock, override. He pressed nothing. He had always believed panic buttons were for other people. Above him, somewhere above him, the house screamed. Alarms bled through the steel in distorted waves. Muffled gunfire followed, not loud enough to be clear, not quiet enough to ignore. The sounds arrived stripped of context, each one landing in his body without explanation. He tried to count them. He failed.
The screen on the wall flickered, then resolved into a live feed. Grainy, partial, a corridor camera angled wrong, showing only a slice of space. Water sprayed across the lens, distorting the image into a blur of motion and light. A body slid past the frame. He recoiled. "No," he said, to no one. His phone was in his hand without him remembering reaching for it. He stared at the screen. No signal. Of course, shielded room, controlled environment, protection that demanded isolation as payment. He struck the wall once with the flat of his palm. The sound was dull, absorbed. This was not how power was supposed to feel. Power, in his life, had always been loud when it wanted to be. It summoned rooms, it bent schedules, it turned obstacles into conversations and conversations into compliance. Power moved outward from him, radiating through institutions that bore his influence like a watermark. Here, it had nowhere to go. The waiting pressed in, each second stretched, unfamiliar and hostile. He checked the screen again. Another flicker, another angle, a flash of red light, water cascading down marble steps. He recognized the lobby. It looked ruined. A shape moved across the frame, fast, controlled. He leaned closer, squinting, trying to make sense of it. The image stuttered. The shape vanished. Then the feed cut out entirely. The blue line returned. System active. "What is happening?" he whispered. The room did not answer. Time passed without markers. No clock ticked, no window shifted light. He was sealed inside an idea of safety that required him to do nothing but wait. And waiting had never been his skill. He imagined the men he had hired, security consultants with resumes thick as law textbooks, firms that spoke in acronyms and promised redundancy. He imagined the cameras, the gates, the contracts that had reassured him that violence could be managed like any other risk. He imagined writing checks. Above him, something heavy fell. The sound carried through the structure, low and final. His breath caught, his chest tightened. For the first time in years, the thought occurred to him, not abstract, not theoretical, but sharp and immediate. I could die here. Not because he was weak, because he was dependent. A knock came at the door. Not a pounding, not frantic. A knock, controlled, deliberate. He froze. The knock came again. "Who is it?" he demanded, voice cracking despite his effort. A pause, silence thick enough to feel intentional. Then a voice, close to the door, calm, female. "It's me." 2 words, no explanation. His stomach dropped. He recognized the voice, not consciously, not by name, but by absence. It was the voice of someone who had never needed his attention, someone whose presence had registered only as function. The maid?" he asked, hating how small it sounded. "Yes." He moved toward the door, then stopped. His hand hovered over the panic panel. "How do I know this is safe?" he asked. Another pause. "You don't," she said. The honesty landed harder than reassurance would have. He unlocked the door. It slid open just enough to reveal her standing there, wet clothes, blood on her hands, face unreadable. She held a rifle with easy familiarity, barrel angled down, finger clear of the trigger. The hallway behind her was dim, lights flickering. A body lay out of frame, implied by the way her stance accounted for space. She looked at him once, not with judgment, not with deference, assessment. "You need to stay here. Do not open this door again unless I come back." Her words were not a request. "Is it swallowed? Is it under control?" She did not answer immediately. Her eyes flicked past him, into the room, cataloging exits, surfaces, blind spots. Even here, even now, she treated space as something that could turn hostile. "Control is temporary," she said finally. Then she stepped past him. He backed away instinctively as she crossed the threshold, moving through his safe room as if it were just another corridor. She checked the panic panel with a glance, adjusted a vent with her free hand, then moved to the wall-mounted screen and disconnected it entirely. "Why would you—" he began. "So it doesn't distract you." She turned back to him. "Wait," he said, the words sharp with something like pleading. "Who are you?" She considered him for half a second. "No one you prepared for," she replied. She left without another word. The door sealed behind her, smooth and final. He stood alone again, heart racing, the echo of her presence lingering like a reprimand. The room felt smaller now, not because of fear, but because something essential had shifted. He had seen the difference between protection and capability, between ownership and agency, between the systems he trusted and the people he ignored. He sank into the chair at last, hands trembling despite himself. The panic panel glowed softly beside him, untouched. Above him, the sounds of fighting continued, closer now, then farther, moving through the house with purpose. He could do nothing, and for the first time he understood that his wealth had not made him strong, it had made him reliant. Reliant on walls he could not defend, on men he could not command, on a woman he had never thought to know. The house had been built to protect him from the world, but now, sealed inside its core, he felt the truth press in from all sides. Money did not remove danger, it only outsourced courage. And when the system cracked, it was not wealth that held the line, it was someone who had never been allowed to hide.
The second wave did not rush. That was how she knew they were learning. The alarms had thinned to a distant howl now, systems cycling through failure modes, lights stuttering between red and white as if undecided about the emergency they were meant to signal. Water still fell in some corridors, not in others. Smoke hung low where suppressants had misfired. The house had lost cohesion. It no longer spoke with one voice. Neither did the attackers. They moved in pairs now, sometimes threes. Spacing tightened, angles checked twice. Radios stayed live, whispers replacing barked commands. Professional adaptation. She crouched behind a marble divider near the west corridor, breathing through her nose, slow and controlled. Her shoulder burned where a round had clipped her earlier, not deep, but enough to remind her she was still flesh. Blood soaked the fabric beneath her sleeve, warm, sticky. She pressed her arm against the stone and waited for the ache to settle into something usable. Pain was information. Her rifle felt heavier than before, not because of weight, but because of time. The body noticed repetition, muscles recorded cost. She checked the magazine, half left. A light above her flickered, once, twice, off, on again. The same light. The repetition landed somewhere deeper than strategy. For a moment, the corridor was not a corridor, but a concrete passage under a different sky. Dust in the air, the smell of burned fuel, a radio crackling with orders that arrived too late or too early, always misaligned with reality. Hold position, advance, wait for confirmation. The voices had come from far away then, filtered through satellites and command rooms with clean floors and insulated walls. She had learned early which orders were survivable. She had learned later which ones were not. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. She counted them. 4. No, 5. One lagging behind. She shifted her stance, favoring her uninjured side, and adjusted the sling on her rifle. Her ID badge, still clipped at her chest, had flipped sideways during the last exchange, plastic cracked, name obscured by a smear of blood that was not hers. A small thing. It irritated her. She reached up, fingers brushing it flat again. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched, longer than before. They were waiting for her to move. She did not. Waiting was not surrender, it was refusal. A flashbang rolled into the corridor, clattering across tile, spinning to a stop near her feet. She kicked it back without looking. The explosion went off around the corner, light and sound slamming into walls meant to impress guests. The house shuddered. Somewhere glass shattered again. She was already moving. She surged forward into the corridor, firing as she ran, not wildly, not continuously. 2 shots, pause, 2 more. Bodies fell where they stood, uniforms torn open, authority leaking out of them in red. A man lunged from a side door, knife flashing. She parried with the rifle, felt metal glance off polymer, then drove her shoulder into his chest. They crashed into the wall together. He was strong, not stronger. She headbutted him once, felt cartilage collapse, then shoved him down and fired point blank. 7 more. Her rifle clicked. Empty. She swore under her breath, soft, old words from another language. She ducked behind a corner and reloaded by feel, hands moving on instinct while her eyes tracked shadows. A round hit the wall inches from her head. Stone exploded. She felt the impact in her teeth. She returned fire and heard a scream cut short. The corridor filled with the smell of cordite and wet stone. Her breathing sounded loud in her ears now, no longer invisible. Fatigue pressed in, not dramatic, not cinematic, just weight, accumulated seconds, repetition without relief. She moved again, deeper into the house, toward narrower spaces where numbers mattered less. A man appeared at the end of the hall, rifle raised. She fired. The rifle jammed. The sound was wrong, a dead click where thunder should have been. Her mind did not panic, it adjusted. She dropped the rifle and stepped into him as he fired, the round tearing through her sleeve, grazing skin. She felt heat. She ignored it. Her hands found his weapon, twisted, broke fingers. She used the rifle like a club until he stopped moving. She took his sidearm. Her ID badge caught on his vest as she turned. It tore free. The lanyard snapped, plastic skittering across the floor and coming to rest beneath the flickering light. She looked at it for half a second. Name obscured, face scratched, authority reduced to debris. She stepped over it. The fighting spread now through stairwells, through private halls, into rooms meant for art and leisure. Paintings took rounds, sculptures shattered, objects bought to signify permanence failed quickly under stress. She passed a fallen guard she recognized, not by name, but by pattern. He had always walked too fast. His badge lay crooked on his belt, still swinging. She closed his eyes without stopping. The mercenaries pressed harder now, more of them, voices overlapping, orders adjusting in real time. Flank left, suppress that corridor. Where is she? She heard the question twice. She smiled once. Another exchange, another burst of motion. She fired, moved, reloaded, breathed. Her shoulder screamed now, her leg dragged slightly. She felt it and corrected. A door slammed shut ahead of her, locked from the other side. She fired into the hinge and kicked it open, using the house's expense against it. Inside, 2 men waited. She dropped one before he raised his weapon. The other charged. They collided, rolling across a carpet that cost more than most people's yearly wages. He punched hard. She took it, used the momentum, drove her knee into his ribs. Crack. She finished it quickly. 35. Her breathing was no longer quiet. Her movements lost their elegance, not their precision. The prose of her body shortened, less flourish, more function. A radio crackled near her foot. She picked it up, listened. She's bleeding. Don't underestimate. Keep pressure. She dropped it and moved on. The house felt smaller now. Corridors repeated. Light failed in patches.
Smoke clung to ceilings. Silence came in longer stretches between fights, heavy and expectant. In one of those silences, memory rose uninvited. A checkpoint at dusk, orders to hold fire, civilians crossing lines drawn by men who would never see them, a superior's voice explaining collateral damage as arithmetic. She had followed orders then. She had questioned them later. The difference cost her everything that came after. Another man stepped into view. She fired. 40. She leaned against the wall afterward, breath ragged, vision tunneling slightly. Her hands shook now, not from fear, but from depletion. She pressed her forehead to the cool stone and closed her eyes for a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Then she pushed off and kept moving, because stopping was how you disappeared. The house was quieter now, but not safe. The mercenaries regrouped elsewhere, the system recalculated, and she, unbadged, wounded, erased, kept correcting a failure she had not designed. Beyond the estate, beyond the glass and stone and money, a larger system watched none of this. The states that trained men like her did not monitor outcomes once contracts changed hands. They produced capability, exported it, then pretended not to recognize it when it returned without permission. Soldiers were assets when convenient, liabilities when inconvenient, ghosts when inconvenient for too long. She moved deeper into the house, blood drying on her sleeve, breath steadying again. 40 down, and no institution coming to claim her.
The first sirens arrived as echoes, not close enough to reassure, not distant enough to ignore. They layered themselves over the estate's failing alarms, different tones, different authorities, each announcing presence without coherence. Red and blue light bled through the trees beyond the perimeter, refracting off glass and water and smoke. The world outside had finally noticed. Too late. Inside the house, radios came alive all at once. Identify yourselves. This is a restricted zone. Repeat, who has command? Voices stacked over one another, clipped and urgent, each assuming primacy, each waiting for someone else to yield. The maid crouched behind an overturned credenza in a private gallery, listening. Her shoulder throbbed, her leg trembled when she let it. She did not let it often. She held a different radio now, taken from a mercenary whose accent had been wrong for this continent. The device was cracked, screen spiderwebbed, but it worked. Static hissed between bursts of speech. Local police requesting perimeter access. Private security refusing handover. Federal authorization pending. Pending, a word that killed more people than bullets ever had. She moved again, slipping through a side passage as boots thundered somewhere above her. Not mercenaries this time. Heavier, louder, less careful. Security forces entered the house the way institutions always did, through the front, through protocol, through assumptions that the threat would wait politely to be processed. Clear, a voice shouted nearby. It was wrong. She came around the corner and saw them, 3 men in tactical gear she recognized by cut and posture. Domestic, official, their patches bore symbols that meant accountability on paper. They saw her at the same time. "Drop the weapon," one shouted, rifle rising. She froze, not because she was caught, but because she calculated. Her hands were bloodied, her clothes soaked. She held a sidearm that did not belong to her. Her badge was gone. She looked exactly like what their training told them to fear. "I'm staff," she said. The words sounded thin even to her. "On the ground, now!" Behind them, another team rushed past, boots splashing through water, eyes fixed ahead.
No one coordinated. No one owned the space. A mercenary appeared at the far end of the corridor and opened fire. The officials reacted instantly, returning fire, shouting commands, bodies colliding as they scrambled for cover. Contact! Contact! The maid moved. She tackled the nearest official sideways as rounds tore through the space where he had been standing. They hit the floor hard. He shouted, furious and confused. "Get off me!" She rolled, came up firing, dropped the mercenary with 2 shots. The corridor fell silent except for heavy breathing. The official stared at her, eyes wide behind his visor. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. "I'm saving you," she said. Another radio squawked. "Hold positions. Do not advance without clearance." "Which clearance?" someone shouted back. No answer. The officials regrouped, weapons up, uncertainty thick in their movements. They had training, yes, but it was training designed for clarity, for command structures that worked, for enemies that wore the right labels. This was not that. A man in a different uniform appeared, private security, badge flashing, voice loud with ownership. "This is a private operation," he snapped. "You need to stand down." A federal agent turned on him. "You don't have jurisdiction here." "We absolutely do," the security chief shot back. "This is private property." Gunfire erupted again, closer this time. Shouts overlapped. "Who's firing? Who authorized? Fall back!" No one fell back. The maid slipped away from them all, moving through a service stairwell as the systems above argued themselves into paralysis. Her radio crackled with voices from places she had never seen, command centers, dispatch rooms, offices with flags and seals on the walls. "Chain of command unclear. Requesting confirmation. Do not engage unless—" Unless what? Unless the right form was signed? She emerged into a long hallway lined with glass display cases, artifacts, awards, objects meant to tell a story about legacy. Bullets had shattered several of them. Shards crunched underfoot. At the far end, 2 mercenaries moved in low, rifles ready. Behind her, footsteps approached, officials this time, shouting orders that contradicted each other. She was between them. She did not choose a side. She chose reality. She fired left. 1 mercenary dropped. The other dove for cover, returning fire. A round struck the display case beside her. Glass exploded outward. She felt shards cut her cheek, warm blood trickling down. She advanced anyway. The mercenary tried to retreat, stumbled over debris, raised his weapon again. An official fired from behind her. The shot took the mercenary in the back. He fell hard, sliding across glass and blood until he stopped. Silence followed. The official lowered his weapon slowly, staring at the body, then at her. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Neither should you, she thought, but she said nothing. Radios screamed again. "Cease fire! Cease fire! Who issued that? Everyone hold!" Holding did not stop the bleeding. In another wing, she heard automatic fire, someone panicking. Screams followed, the sound of bodies falling without plan. She moved towards it. The house had become a map of overlapping authorities, public, private, federal, corporate, each convinced of its mandate, none able to see the whole. Locked protocols prevented shared access. Radios operated on different frequencies. Clearance levels overlapped without aligning. Too many systems, none accountable. She emerged onto a long balcony overlooking the lobby and saw the result. Security forces crouched behind columns she had used earlier, mercenaries pinned down near the staircase, private guards firing from angles that endangered everyone. Orders collided mid-air. "Advance! Hold! Fall back!" No one advanced, no one held, no one fell back. She fired twice from above, dropping 2 mercenaries and forcing the rest to retreat. The lobby echoed with renewed chaos. Someone shouted, "Who fired that?" No one answered. She moved again, always moving, slipping between factions that mistook motion for threat and stillness for control. Blood streaked the marble now in too many directions to assign ownership. Radios lay crushed underfoot. Badges, official, private, meaningless, floated in shallow pools of water. From above, from outside, from screens and reports, this would later be described as a complex incident, a failure of communication, an unfortunate overlap of responsibilities, a tragedy, everyone would say. Inside, it felt simpler. A system was designed to distribute power without responsibility, and now it was bleeding from every joint. The maid disappeared into another corridor as fresh sirens arrived beyond the walls. More help, more confusion, more authority without coherence. She was no longer fighting mercenaries alone. She was fighting the architecture of modern order. And it was losing to its own design.